We will go back out through that space. If you hit your head, watch it the second time. Hopefully you won't do it again. You learned a little bit. Now, as we're making our way in, if you thought that felt a little tight, I want you to think about what it would have been like to crawl through that space. Because the first person to ever find the cave, or documented person, went through an opening that was only 1.5 feet tall by about 2 feet wide. It was actually a Union soldier. Their camp was about a 1/4 mile away from here in the 1860s. That person found a hole, and they decided one day they were going to crawl through it. How many of you would do the same thing if you saw a 1.5 by 2 foot hole that was dark on the inside? And cool. Yeah, I'm with you, right? I would go in that hole. And so this individual crawled through that tunnel when it was short. He was crawling through clay, he was muddy, he was soaking wet, but then made it into this room. This room has not been altered. It's about 35 feet tall, and it goes off behind you or to your left, and continues in the opposite direction as well. But one thing you probably noticed on the way in is there's an area closed sign right here. This section of the cave is closed to humans. That half-mile junction is a biological preserve inside the cave. We keep that open to only wildlife, so that way all the life that exists inside the cave has a place to go where they will not be disturbed by humans. And it's been closed off to people for about 60 years now. We do sometimes have bat populations that are over there, but mainly salamander species that live over there. Not quite the cave salamander, the orange one with the black spots you saw on the way in. Cave salamanders like to stay in the twilight zone of the cave where some of that light still comes in because they're eating those insects. But the salamanders back there are grotto salamanders, or blind cave salamanders. They do not utilize eyes. They have them when they're bored, but they turn to mush, so that way they don't waste energy developing the eyes they're not going to use, and they stay back over there. We probably will not see any of those today, because most of our population is back in that area, but we could. I will look for them if we do.
What do they eat?
So what do they eat? A lot of the food sources inside the cave itself comes from our bats. Whenever bats come into the cave, they have to go to the bathroom. And so they poop or produce guano, as we like to call it, the technical term. And that fresh guano has nutrients in it. Just like bear poop or scat you would find outside, animals are going to be attracted to it, insects mainly. And those insects that are attracted to the guano are what our grotto cave salamanders will be eating. So the bats that do survive over there are the main reason we actually have salamanders inside the cave today. And you will get to see some guano today, so don't worry. Probably not bats, but you'll see a lot of poop today. Now, we are going to move to a section of the cave that has a little bit more coming out of the ceiling and the ground and the walls. I want you to think back to your 2nd and 3rd grade, maybe 1st grade even, school lessons. And think about the cave formations you learned about a long time ago, or maybe more recently, and see which names you can remember and point out as we move, because we will start to see those typical cave formations a lot more as we get more water coming into the cave today. So y'all can follow after me. We'll keep on going. Ranger Addie, you're doing a great job with my back, okay?
Ranger Addie didn't respond.
No. Ranger Addie never responded. Yeah. Well, I think it'd be fun. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people want to do that.
That way over.
What? I don't know. It's like a set of steps.
We better follow the tour guide. We get in trouble getting online.
Take it out. Big step.
Those are the farm ice cream she was talking about. She'll tell you about it here. Amber, we'll drop off over there. Okay, they're right behind me here, baby. Or actually go here.
Alright, so as you look around you, you have noticed there's a ton of formations that have started to develop in this room. I am going to quiz you. Hopefully you remember first, second, and third grade just a little bit. What is the cave formation that comes from the ceiling or holds tight to the ceiling? That's a hint.
Stalactite.
Good, stalactite. They hold tight to the ceiling. They have a C for ceiling in it. Now we also have something on the ground. It's its partner in crime. What's the one on the ground?
Stalagmite.
Good, stalagmite. They're on their ground where you might trip over them. Over time, a stalactite with each drip of water extends a little bit more. And as it drips down to its stalagmite, the stalagmite's going to get a little bit taller. So eventually they could join together. And if they join together, they form what we call a, pretend this one's attached. It used to be. What do you call it when they meet? All right, this one's really astonishing. Are you ready? We call it a column because it looks like a column. So that's what you get to call them. Now, this column I did say is broken. It's not attached anymore. And that's because the ground, or what we're calling the ground, is not solid rock. It is clay. And clay can be smushed. And calcite is really, really heavy over time. You're building hundreds to potentially thousands of pounds of weight in calcite. So eventually, this bottom part of the column got so heavy it smushed the clay. That is a scientific term, smush. And then it broke the column. However, as water continues to come down and drips, it can eventually reform this column. And then that cycle may just continue over and over again. We do have some other cave formations in this room. You may not know the names of these, but what do these look like to you? Icicles, okay. What else? Dripstone. Dripstone. This is a type of dripstone. Good job. Does this look like curtains to anyone? Or an older word for it, drapes. These are what we call drapery. It is simply where water, instead of dripping from the ceiling, flows along an overhang and then starts to come down the overhang. So you get more of a drape or curtain effect. You also get, I worked a little hint of this in, but flowstone. Flowstone is where water flows against the wall or floor of the cave and leaves behind a thin layer of calcite. It almost looks more like a frozen waterfall effect. And we'll get to see this a lot more. Typically, as we continue to see it in the cave, there'll be a lot more on the wall.
Look, you see that over there?
Just like down
Really
here.
big drop off.
Or sometimes like this,
You can go behind me and
flowing down on
Or
the
look over there.
walls towards the ground of the cave. Now we do have one last really common cave formation. This one's a little hard to find in this room, so I'm just going to point out this little guy here. It's a very thin, hollow tube. What do you call? Good, nice, good memory. I like this. We call them straws like a straw you drink out of because they are hollow, like a straw you drink out of. We're not always the most creative people in the science world. Sometimes we like to name things for exactly what they look like. And those soda straws, I want you to grab just one strand of hair for me. That is how thin a soda straw is. They're hollow in the center with water moving through. And if you were to touch something as thin as a strand of hair, what would happen to it? It'll probably break. But we can affect all these formations not only by having them break, but by simply touching them. We are going to move to an area where we see a lot of soda straws on the ceiling, and where we also have some formations that have been touched for a long time and see what happens if they were touched. Now, are we going to touch those formations? Okay, perfect, good. You guys are keeping a good memory.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Has anybody ever went down in that drop off?
Cave explorers have. We've never had any visitors accidentally go down that hole,
That's good. But,
and no rangers leading tours go down that hole.
okay.
Which is also
That's
good.
what I meant, explorers.
Yeah, absolutely. But we have had cave explorers that have looked into just about any nook and cranny you can find around here.
Okay.
Any other questions before we go? All right, follow
Wait,
after.
Addie has a question.
Yeah, Addie, what's up?
Has any of the stuff in this cave been touched?
Yes. Some of the stuff inside this cave has been touched, and we're going to see what it looks like if we did touch something, okay? Okay, hold on to that thought. We're gonna move down some stairs to an area where things have been touched. As you move down the stairs, it's very slippery. Please be careful and watch your way.
Is someone taking pictures? No.